Okay, let's have a look at the blues progression. Now we're going to do this in the key of G, and I want to show you where you can use this Lydian dominant scale. And this is going to be the place where you're probably going to be able to practice this the most, apart from of course the static backing track that I've given you. That's just a G7 chord, static with a band, you know, a real live nice performance, so you can jam along and learn that G Lydian dominant scale. But let me show you a context where you can apply it in a chord progression and use it in a couple of different places, so you'll have some more options available to you. Now the blues that we're going to do, real simple 3-chord blues. We're not going to do anything complex like a jazz blues or add any extra weird turnarounds in there or anything. We're going to have 3 chords: G7, C9 and D9. We could have G9 if we wanted to, or just a straight C7 and a straight D7, but we'll stick with G7, C9 and D9, okay? Now the G7 I'm going to play as our standard G7 shape. Again, we've already learned that shape. That's basically, it's not the big 6-string shape, but where we miss out the root, the 5th on the A string and the high E. So again, consult the material to find that shape again. Then we're going to play C9, which is 3rd fret on the A, 2nd fret on the D, 3rd fret on the G, 3rd fret on the B. And our D9 is the same thing, 2 frets higher. So 5, 4, 5, 5 on the A, D, G and B. Okay, we're going to play this kind of a groove. So on and so forth. Okay, just a standard 12-bar blues. You'll hear it when we actually play along with it on the looper. Okay, now, if we think about the progression, the first thing that happens in this progression is we've got a G7 for 4 bars. So in a way, at least for the first 3 bars, we can approach this as if it was a static G7 vamp, because it lasts for ages, okay? We've got this. Then we go to the C, back to the G. Then the D, followed by C, finally G. And we can go back to the D at the end if we want to, okay? Now, because it lasts for so long, as I say, we can think of it like a static vamp. And that means we can play G Lydian dominant over it. If we look at the chord, it's a straight G7. It's got no altered tones in it, no sharp 9s, flat 5s or sharp 5s. It's not a G7 sharp 5 or a G7 flat 5 or a G7 flat 9 or sharp 9 or any combination of those. It also has no suspended 4th in it. It's not G7 sus 4. You can use this on a blues, but you can't play Lydian dominant if you do it. Okay? You hear Larry Carlton do that all the time. He plays a different scale over it when he does that. In this context, we can use our minor pentatonic, we can use our mixed Lydian scale, should you know it, but we can also use our Lydian dominant sound, okay? Now, the next chord that we get is a C9. Now, what's interesting about this chord is we have to look at how it resolves. Where does it go? Okay, when we look back at our G7, in bar 4, that G7 goes into bar 5 and resolves upper 4th to C. Now that makes it, in bar 4, turn from a static dominant 7th into a resolving dominant 7th. And usually at that point, people play a different scale over that chord. Now we're not here to actually do that right now. You can keep playing your Lydian dominant, you can keep playing your minor pentatonic or blues licks, or your mixed Lydian scale, that's going to work fine. But in that bar 4, just be aware that what happens is that G resolves up to C. It's very similar to our cadence that we had earlier on. Okay, so it turns into a resolving dominant, but before that point, we just think of it as a static G7 vamp, so we can play Lydian dominant. Now, when we look at our C7, well, it resolves back to G, which is down a 4th, okay? C going down to G. That's a non-resolving movement from that root note. It's not going up a 4th or down a 5th, it's going down a 4th. And remember, any other movement than up a 4th, down a 5th, we class as non-resolving, okay? We don't get that tension resolution thing going on as much anyway. So on that one, we can also play Lydian dominant, C Lydian dominant. In this case, Take your shape that you learnt for G Lydian dominant and move it up to the 8th fret on the E string and you'll get C Lydian dominant. Or you could play your arpeggios down here. So on and so forth. You could put that sharp 11 in there. Same shape that we played up at the 10th fret for G, but now we're thinking down here for C. Here's our C root note. Again, if you learn the scales as intervals based around the root notes, this whole thing of moving them around becomes a lot easier. Okay, so we can now try Lydian dominant on our G7, the 1 chord, and on the 4 chord, the C9. The only place we really don't want to do it is the D7, okay? Because the D7 eventually resolves back down a 5th to G. Okay, that is a resolving dominant. It's like a 5-to-1 relationship. So we don't really want to do it over that D7. Of course, you can try it if you like, see if you like the sound of it. Music isn't all about rules, it's about taste, but generally most people don't do it. What they tend to do is G Lydian dominant, C Lydian dominant. When you get to that resolution section, that last bit, people tend to play the minor pentatonic scale. Okay, that tends to work really, really nicely. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play over this progression. I'm going to use just the minor pentatonic initially. Then I'm really going to make a big deal of that sharp 11 on both the G7 and on the C7 chord. Okay, so you really get to hear how that works and the sound that it gives you. And again, don't do this every time. Bring this as part of your vocabulary. Make sure that you're utilizing it in context with all the other things that you can already do. You don't want to be doing this and switch off everything you already know and go straight into just using these arpeggios and this scale. You want to combine these things in a musical manner. That's how we get variety and interest in our improvisations. So let me do that for you now. This will be the last improvisation, then we'll round everything up and see where we've got to, guys. So I'll see you on the other side. So there we have it. That's the Lydian dominant in a blues context. And again, if you understand this thing of non-resolving dominance, static grooves, this is really going to help you to identify when you can use the Lydian dominant. And of course, if in doubt, as long as you're not on a gig, try it out. You know, if you see a dominant seventh and you're not sure, see what it sounds like. You know, sometimes you'll be right, sometimes you'll be wrong. Eventually what's going to happen is your ear is going to really help you to identify when and where, I should say, you can and can't use this Lydian dominant sound. But hopefully this has been useful, rounding up kind of, first of all, what is it? Outlining what the actual scale is, the arpeggios, the chords, so on and so forth, and then the idea of kind of how we can actually utilize it. What I recommend you do now is you use that static G7 backing track to actually practice with. You'll find that on the disc. So yeah, there we go.